Hey, hey, listen up. सोच जरा सोच 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 आसानी क्यों ढूंढ रहा तू रोड 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 जहाँ जाएगी ना रोड ऐसे आएंगे कुछ मोर देन यू gotta pave make way खुद के लिए यो सोच जरा सोच 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 छोड़ी क्यों है ख्वाबों की वो खोज 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 छोड़ चेस अट्रैक्ट करो मैप पूरा ट्रैक करो all you gotta do is freaking go 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 सोच जरा बैठ के अब सोचते हैं सोच जरा ये कि लोगों में वो सोच नहीं है खास इनके शौक नहीं है काहेली किस बात की जब सारा कुछ यहाँ फोन पे है प्रोडक्ट सोच जिगर इधर सारे अपने जोन में है 9 to 5 ही करना बता और कोई तेरे गोल्स नहीं है कंफर्ट जोन में है बाहर आके गौर करे शुरू अपनी खोज करें कहाँ पे ना ही स्नोर करे रोज लड़े जाग जाएं सोच पे ध्यान करें
All right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining our 35th Sochology Edu series. So this is our last one before we go on a summer break, and we'll be back in September. My name is Mudassir Bongish. I'll be hosting today's session. We have a super special guest for you today who'll be speaking to us about product hacks for startup success. As always, whether you're joining us from LinkedIn or YouTube, please post your questions into the chat, and we'll bring them up either during or at the end of the session. Now, with product managers at all levels being inundated with a never-ending list of tasks to complete and milestones to achieve, it can become overwhelming to determine what success looks like for your product and how to get there as fast as possible. In this talk, we'll go over some product tips and tricks and examples from the industry where startup products were able to hack their way to success. And mind you, this talk isn't just for startups. Even giants like Amazon, of course, adhere to the philosophy of treating every day as day one, so stay tuned. We're excited to be joined by Rebecka Zavaleta. Rebecka is the co-founder and CEO of Paismo, an HR tech startup that aims to revolutionize the future of work in emerging markets by providing comprehensive hire-to-retire solutions. It is Pakistan's first modern HR tech, payroll, and benefits provider to go global in markets such as MENA and Southeast Asia. With its made in Pakistan for the world vision, Paismo's software as a service offering is built to provide solutions internationally while creating local impact. They also recently raised a seed round of 1.3 million in an oversubscribed round, taking its total funding to date to 1.5 million, and is backed by top global venture capital and regional investors led by Indus Valley Capital with participation from Antler and Jadar Capital. Rebecka is also the founder and creator of First Milli, a wealth building initiative to help individuals get to their first million in net worth. She graduated from the University of Pennsylvania and has been featured in Time magazine. I first met Rebecka almost 2 years ago at Plus 92 Disrupt in Islamabad and was blown away by her session on the same topic. So, Rebecka, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. Over to you.
Thanks, Mudassir. That intro was amazing. I sound really awesome, so thanks. Appreciate that. Hey everyone, so my name's Rebecka. I have been doing product for more than a decade now. I think it's almost 12, 14 years of releasing products. And over the years, you really learn a thing or two about what works in across different organizations, different employee size, and I guess kind of like the sort of like some neat hat tricks, So as I go through this presentation, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to put in the chat, and I will love to answer them as I go through. So like Mudassir had shared a bit, I am a Mexican-American from Los Angeles. I have been leading product for over 10 years in fintech, advertising technology, and machine learning. I have built with Google's YouTube, Meta, TikTok. I have built all of these products that I have ever built has been from scratch. And I have learned to have two models over time. And some of these models are well known in the space, but not as practiced as much. One of them is fail fast and learn quickly. I believe in getting to 80%. 80% is enough for me. And then just learning, because the iteration cycle from the 80% is worth more than like getting to the 100%. But ultimately, there is no 100%. And then focusing more on value release focus, getting a feature into the hands of a user is the most important thing so that you can start working on your feedback loops. Okay, so what will you learn? You will learn a few frameworks on how to become a game-changing product thinker, how to ship quickly, iterate quickly, and move your teams faster. You will learn popular frameworks and product that works for both hardware and software development. The the famous agile methodologies originally come from the 1980s Japanese automobile industries. Many car makers in the US were trying to figure out how were the Japanese able to push out these cars so fast, because the cycle on getting these cars out was long. So many realized it was the Scrum agile methodologies that are now kind of like tattooed within every single product person's brain now. The third piece is staying focused. You have to decipher between the noise versus signal. Just because you make your product free and you have everyone using it doesn't mean that you're actually delivering value. You have to figure out kind of like more on the R funnel, like where are people actually using it? What do you consider activation? If you don't have a plan for your product, then where's your product really going? Switching from a prescriptive sort of like frame of thinking to problem-focused initiatives. By this, I mean, I always try to push my engineering teams to not let me come up with the answer, but rather they kind of lead by focusing on the problem statement itself. So I always ask, what are we solving for? Why are we building this? What's the point of this, etc. So asking this question all the time starts putting this as part of like your team's DNA. So it's very important. The next one is pushing value through creating constraints. Getting a PM to deploy a product that they feel isn't ready is you will see becomes an issue. That's why it's important for you to create constraints. Sometimes if a decision-making process, someone perceives that it can take a week, I say, okay, if you have to answer this in one day, what would that solution look like, right? So I always try to go for shooting for actual decision making and reducing the bottlenecking by saying things like, okay, how would this look like just in 3 bullet points, right? Or even like Amazon sort of like press release sort of a strategy. Like if you had to describe your product on one page, it's all about one pagers, then how would you do it, right? So this is pushing how to create value by creating constraint. And as well as like just pushing further and further by asking yourself the 5 whys, never just rely on the customers. Like if a customer says that they want to do something for X reason, you have to keep asking the customer why, or your stakeholder why, in order to understand the fundamental issue at hand, right? And then the idea is after you get to the 5th why, everyone has kind of like just lost their minds, and or you have found your answer. So you'll get to one part of them. I think Teresa from Silicon Valley Product Group also pushes for the 5 whys as well. Maybe that's where it comes from. So for noise and signal, the last piece is focusing on value releasing and versus like staying afloat sort of startup strategies. I call staying afloat kind of like a vanity metrics, so how are we judging ourselves as a startup in order to truly remain successful? So, okay. So questions you should ask yourself is, to determine whether or not you are really implementing product hacks is how fast are you iterating? So my team is taught to deploy every 2 weeks. No matter what, we deploy every 2 weeks. If they are bug fixes, if they are improvements, because some features take months to deliver, right? So you can't exactly get it out in 2 weeks. But the idea is that if you end up with a giant build, you'll get stuck in actually releasing the feature. So you have to find ways to break down your feature into smaller pieces that are more digestible by the user. I mean, like even look how AI is changing WhatsApp or Facebook. Now the search bar at the top has like the little AI little piece. Everyone's just adding, making new changes, but there has to be a bigger picture at the end of the day. So we won't see what it looks like, but we know that they are slowly kind of like playing out the delivery. They're carefully looking at the metrics. How do we use the search bar now that we know that AI is already implemented in there? How fast are you failing/learning? I have found that with organizations that are afraid to fail, they don't learn, right? Because everyone's too busy trying to deliver the 100% perfect package that they're terrified of getting to the 80%. How often are you deploying? My benchmark is every 2 weeks. I have seen some companies do every 1 week, but that you also have to think what's sustainable. 1 week makes sense if you're like really trying to move fast on prototyping. 2 weeks makes more sense if you want to keep things sustainable. Engineers, in my experience, like the 2 week cycle. I don't know if others have had different experiences. And how often are you getting feedback from customers? What are the sort of like feedback loops that you are creating with your customers? It could be as simple as a WhatsApp group, as a Slack group, whatever it is. You need to create a way for customers to report back to you. Hey, you like, for example, Paismo has a clock in clock out feature, and things that are so that you think are intuitive aren't always intuitive, right? We have some users who don't know how to clock in clock out even. So it makes us really think like, okay, like, 80% of our users don't have issues, 20% do. How can we actually improve the process, even though like for us in our little silo, it's fundamentally like easy to do, right? It's just our brains all work a bit differently, and we have to consider and cater to that. The next piece is how and what are the channels in which you get feedback from customers. This is a very important piece because when an organization tends to get larger, the channels in which you get feedback from customers, like the larger the deal size, the louder that customer is. But let's say you're not actually trying to cater to enterprise customers. So why is the product team scrambling to cater to that enterprise customer? So it's very important to think like, where is this information coming back from? What is sort of motivating my CEO to make our whole platform yellow, right? So you have to constantly think about all these pieces. Product is honestly just an incredible field. It's very much an art. The next piece is finding product market fit is hard. This is a key point to learn within startups, especially as you're sort of like product hacking through things. Yet product market fit is not enough. What is enough is building your innovation machine, right? If you don't have a team that questions you, if you don't have a product team, if you have a product team that is just constantly working on delivering deliverables and not questioning the end game, then once you do miraculously find product market fit, guess what? This space changes so fast. It's going like that PMF is going to change, right? MySpace thought they found their PMF, and then it became they died, and then Facebook came in and filled it in. Facebook thought they found their PMF. I mean, I've noticed that in countries like Pakistan, people still use Facebook a lot, but not as in the US. Instagram kind of like took over, then Snapchat took over from Instagram. Instagram kind of like came back after they realized that stories and like lives and reels were like kind of like the go-tos, and they put that into their own product. So I would say like Snapchat has now like fallen behind, and now we have TikTok, right? So PMF is constantly changing. It's always about having the wheels for change in order to stay competitive at PMF, because the world we saw from a year ago, I mean, look at COVID. Look what COVID did to us. Just can dramatically change more than we originally believed. And where this is tying everything in together is that if you don't manage your product, someone else will, right? So MySpace wasn't really managing their product roadmap. We weren't really in the space yet where the PMF was constantly changing. So this is why it's important to figure out what's coming between like the signal versus the noise. We know that Facebook had started working on their Libra currency, and that didn't really go anywhere, right? So it's kind of just making sure you're staying on top of the pulse you're developing, and it's just a role where you're kind of like all over the place on making sure everything's making sense, right? And this is essentially the piece between noise or signal. Like, what did Instagram learn from Snapchat stories, right? And what did Instagram learn from TikTok? We start to see there's a part in the space where it's kind of like a fast follow. I don't know if anyone's from the media space, you know that fast follow means that how do you maintain virality by making sure you're always, the New York Times has to display the most big the biggest headlines like ever, period, right? If you miss a big headlines, you're no longer the New York Times, right? So you have to play this different role between like investigative journalism, deep dive journalism, things that sort of like keep you true to your brand. And you also have to do fast follow, right? But you have to figure out like what are the deep dive sort of products and what are the fast follow sort of products, right? If every car in the industry has a cup holder, you don't have a choice. You need a cup holder because everyone expects a cup holder from their car, even Lamborghini. I've noticed this because one of my friends is a huge supercar enthusiast. There was like a big hole on the passenger seat, and I realized that hole was meant to be like the cup holder. Like Lamborghini was losing to certain luxury vehicles due to the fact that they didn't have a cup holder. So these are simple things that yet that are so important that you constantly have to be considering as the space continues to move, which is why we have product teams, right? So what's the difference between, maybe you think you're a good product thinker, so what's the difference between a good product thinker versus a game-changing product thinker? How can you build something that puts your company 3 years ahead of the curve, right? Because that's the whole point. Like, how do we stay ahead? So a good product thinker, this is probably someone who is just starting out in their career. They focus a lot on deployment, just getting the product out. They're not really thinking about post-deployment, feedback loops. How are we measuring success? What are the 3 metrics? I try to push my teams as much as possible to figure out, like, okay, great, you deploy the product. You had a lot of sweat and tears. That's wonderful. But what about success? Like, how do we know we succeeded? Um, you know, simple things like, for example, our clock in, clock out feature, which brings us insane daily active usage. We had a deploy where we forgot the push notifications that reminded a user to clock in and clock out. Like, it doesn't matter that you release an incredibly complex feature if you're not sort of like dotting your I's and crossing your T's on the imperatives, then your product will suffer. So you also have to think about how these changes look like within a changing landscape. A good product thinker is unwilling or doesn't know how to challenge the status quo. You'll hear from, even Marty Kagan wrote a book called Empowered, simply because he realized that, and Marty Kagan, he's like the famous writer from Inspired. He's an incredible product thinker, because he realized that a lot of product people have a difficult time sort of navigating a sales-led organization and pushing their product ideas through. How do they access high-ticket sort of like customers? So it's important for a great game-changing product thinker to not be afraid to challenge the status quo and learn how to use their stakeholder management skills in order to sort of give way to challenging the status quo. A good product thinker just focuses on releases but doesn't test their release. There's like the QA testing, but there's also the product testing. Every single prod deploy, there has to be product testing as well, right? The accountability 100% always goes to the product person. A good product thinker hasn't set up KPIs for their releases. They don't know their user personas, just like a seller knows what their ICP is, their ideal customer profile. You have to know, who was this feature for? Is this specific user using it? And a good product thinker is very reactive to noise. Imagine being a PM at Facebook and so Instagram, and literally copying everything that TikTok does simply because you're just reacting to the noise. You have to see how things sort of play out. A game-changing product thinkers, they challenge the status quo. They narrow down the problem. They know the problem. They know the customer. They know their team's strengths and weaknesses. They know how to like quickly prototype. They know their stakeholders, and they especially know how to unit flow. So unit flowing is a concept that I push my product teams really hard on. Unit flow is, you have a happy path unit flow. Like, if like, let's say I'm buying food from Uber Eats or Food Panda or something, the happy flow is I found what I wanted, I put it in my cart, and then I pay for it within my cart, and now it's on the way, right? We all know that in food delivery business, it doesn't always go like that, because the number one thing customers care about is, when is my food going to get here after I paid for it? What your biggest pain point is going to be, why is it late? How I waited an hour for my food to arrive, yet my food hasn't arrived. So then you see these food product focused food companies sort of kind of like show the little, like, they break down the pieces, like, okay, your order has been placed. Now we're waiting. Now it's being cooked, and now it's in delivery, and now you see that it is literally within this car, and it is now 5 minutes away, so that you know exactly when your food is being delivered is actually not going to be delivered. Because I can't tell you how many times I yelled at Uber Eats when I waited 2 hours for my food to arrive. So that it's important, very important, to do unit flows of, like, what if everything goes wrong in this flow? What is kind of like the alternative to get them back into the happy path sort of unit flow? And the last part of what I believe makes a game-changing product thinker, and probably the most important part, is you have to know how to capture signal, right? If you're not, let's say the success is happening, but if you're not able to capture that success or even that failure, how will you know? You got to be able to test and learn, right? So you got to be able to figure that out. So I'm 8 minutes. I have about 8 minutes left. I'm going to run over to the most important thing that I've been like hammering around lately. So, and then feel free to ask questions and I can backtrack. I just want to make sure I cover this. Okay. The R, I don't know if anyone here has heard of the R sort of pirate metrics. The R for us at Paismo has significantly grew in complexity and in depth. Every decision we make is based on this R funnel. It's acquisition, activation, revenue, and referral. Or I don't know, I always forget the last two. But every single feature we release is making sure that we start beefing up the top funnel of the R funnel, so that we can get to the retention piece, right? So Paismo, for example, we're very early stage. It's we're in crazy build mode. We're trying to build out 7 years of like features into 1 year. So it's like build. Let's study how the best companies have figured it out, and then we're Picassoing it, right? So we're learning how to build out those frameworks based on how those companies have figured it out, right? If it's on the left side instead of on the right side, if they prioritize, like in terms of information hierarchy, if they prioritize this word instead of this word, then that gives us signal that, okay, maybe we should do the same, because we are learning from their learnings, and that's allowing us to move even faster, right? So in terms of like everything you build, you have to understand that sometimes your acquisition features shouldn't be measured from the retention sort of part of the funnel, because they're absolutely completely different features. So you have to think about what are the KPIs. For example, for Airbnb, what constitutes a activation, right? Acquisition is the user gets onto the platform. The activation is the user actually starts using the platform. But how do you determine what an activation is, right? This is kind of like where startups fail a lot. Airbnb can say, oh, I have millions of users signed up onto my product. But if no one's using the product, who cares about those million users, right? What is the defining metric for activation? So for Paismo, it's running payroll, right? They have learned running payroll means a whole bunch of pieces that have happened already. It means that the user has learned how to upload their data properly. The user has employees added into the product. The user has put in accurate sort of salary information. The user has figured out how to put proper work schedules. There's just so many details that go into this. And only then can you actually run a payroll. So that is kind of like how we're measuring activation. Airbnb is based on nights booked. Once a customer has figured out how to book one night, then they can figure out how to do it again, and that's how they can actually get value from the product. So as you go through different stages, each sort of stage for acquisition, for activation, for retention, for revenue, for referral, there are different sort of like goals that you should have. All right, so I have 5 minutes left. I wanted to create space for Q&A. Mudassar?
Yeah. So we don't have any audience questions in, but it's interesting you talked about kind of separating out acquisition, activation, retention, right? And you gave the Airbnb example. So acquisition, somebody lands on their site, but you know, and they try to enforce activation or try to get you to activate, because let's say you browse something and then you'll get a notification like a day or two later in your email, hey, are you still interested in this listing? Or, you know, the price has gone down, et cetera, right? So those are kind of separate products that they've kind of delineated like that. And it's we often get stuck in like daily active users, monthly active users, just kind of like vanity metrics. But I
Yes.
think what you've highlighted, it's super important to kind of get a deeper picture of what your user is actually going through, rather than just looking at vanity metrics. I also, so if we can go back a couple of slides, we were talking about failing fast and kind of moving fast. And you gave the WhatsApp example. So it's really interesting. First time Meta AI, I saw Meta AI on the search bar in my WhatsApp.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody else picked on it, but like the search bar was off, right? It was
Yes.
just off in the app. Yeah, you remember that, right? And I was
Yeah.
like, how can Meta, like this, you know, $100 billion company, release this? But
Yes.
they decided, okay, you know what, good enough, and they released it. They obviously fixed it like a couple of days later, 2-3 days later, but it was really surprising for me to see that. And now you don't even think about it, right? It still allowed you to function. It didn't look great, but at least they pushed the product out. They were able to kind of get people to start using it, regardless of whether it was centered or not. And so, yeah, I think that approach really works. I guess one question I have is, you know, if you are if you think you're a game-changing product thinker, but you're stuck in an organization that doesn't allow you to become that, right? And Marty talks about that as well. Like, what are some of the kind of tips and tricks that, you know, you can provide us in terms of how we can move our organizations towards thinking differently? Because at the end of the day, your organization has to kind of move in the same direction. You do have to be product led in order to see success, right? So, but unfortunately, you know, that is the case for I think a lot of product managers where you know, they're part of these, I don't know, legacy companies or kind of sales led companies where this is going on. So what kind of advice would you give them?
Yeah, that's actually a great question, and that's honestly what drives me away from companies as a product person. After I feel I really did try to push this so hard, you know, being a product, like getting a sales led organization, because this usually happens within a sales led organization. To become a product led organization is pretty near impossible. However, there are sort of like little tips and tricks that you can do. For example, it also depends on the type of business model that it is. For example, high ticket items. For example, let's say your sellers are working on multi-million-dollar deals, and for you to get access to that client because you're trying to get feedback, you're probably going to be in that meeting room and you're going to say, oh, what if we do some sort of multi-language, multilingual sort of like blah, 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 blah. Then the seller is probably going to look at you and say, you've just ruined my renewal. Like, you know, because
Yeah.
so you have to work with the sales team. You have to work with the accounts team or the respective departments that really work closely to those clients in order to understand, okay, here's what I can't say, here's what I can say. Oh, okay, this is the perspective of my seller. This is why he's trying to sort of move them into this direction. So you have to really consider all the various sort of stakeholders, and then you kind of have to spoon feed it, because what I have learned is that clients don't really understand what alpha is, what beta is, what a
Mhm.
prototype is. Like as a product person, we live and breathe this, right? But and especially in emerging markets like Pakistan, the product is either complete or it isn't. And if it isn't complete, why isn't it complete? And like, doesn't matter how many times you said alpha, you stamped alpha. The idea is that you have to look for champions within your organization who understand the importance of moving fast. Marty Kagan even has started doing webinars for the C-suite, because he has realized that, yes, like I have created this beautiful world of inspired where I want the product thinkers to like think in, but then in reality we're kind of stuck. We can't really go into this magical unicorn world. So it's a lot of like working with kind of like the champions that you do have around you to sort of start doing that in smaller sort of pieces. And if they start seeing the success in that, then they'll start giving you more and more space to do that sort of exploration. You're basically going to like the Queen of Spain or back in the old days and asking if you can take some ships to the Americas and do some exploration, right? That's kind of like how they see it.
Sure. Awesome. Thank you. We have one question in. So is the Sean Ellis survey still a relevant indicator in measuring the product market fit? I'm not familiar with this survey, so I don't know if you've had a.
Yeah. Sean Ellis is one of the writers for Hacking Growth or Growth Hacking. I forget. Maybe I have dyslexia or something. But it's this red book about how to basically implement metrics for like growth products, sort of like hacking. I think it depends a lot on the product that you're building, and whether or not like it's a very general question. You kind of have to figure out if it makes sense for your product, and no one knows best except the product person working on it.
Gotcha.
How to better define KPIs for a product. Okay, so KPIs for me is like you have max 3. You start focusing on more than 3 KPIs, you're going to start going into a data hole of you're spending more of your time trying to figure out how to better measure versus asking yourself if you're getting the value from the measurement, right? So these KPIs have to be clear, concise, easy to measure. You're actually capturing what you do want to measure. So it's important for these KPIs to be kind of like within those realms, kind of like smart goals,
Yeah, KPIs are, I think,
Azim.
something that a lot of people struggle with, right? It's usually like top down. Oh, now we're doing KPIs, and across the organization, and then you have like your product KPIs, and then you'll have other departments KPIs, and then they roll over to like organizational kind of KPIs, right? So at least the way I look at KPIs is every single metric that you are measuring should do one of 2 things: provide value to the user and provide value to the organization, or do both of those things at the same time, right? If you're not doing both, doesn't matter if your customer facing KPI is amazing, but if it's not providing any value to your organization, then you're not really doing well as a product, right? Or vice versa. So
Yeah.
All right. Okay, I think that those are all the questions. That's all the time we had for today. So Rebecka, thank you so much on behalf of the product community and Product Soch. Thank you for taking the time to come on again. Such an insightful session on such an important topic. And thanks to all of you for joining us. So if you haven't already, make sure to follow the Product Soch LinkedIn page so you can be in the know on all future in-person events and sessions. Have a great day, and I'll see you guys after the summer. Thank you.
Thanks, Professor. Thanks, everyone.